Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's best practice webinar. We are going to be talking about BoardDocs policy practices today. So welcome. I see folks are still jumping on. We'll give everybody a minute or so to get settled in, and we'll be back here in just a few, and we'll get started. All right. Andrew, are we ready to roll?
I am ready to roll if you are ready to roll.
I am. Let's do this. I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. You can see my screen, correct? The policy.
I can.
Perfect.
Looks great.
Well, yeah, great. Well, everyone, thanks for showing up and being willing to take some time of your day to learn a best practice from BoardDocs. Today, the topic is policy. As I'm sure you are all well aware, Merit has been doing these things for a while, and she's wonderful. She will go through all the tricks and trades or tricks of the trade in terms of our policy tool. And that's the two people that are on the call today. It's me and Merit, or Merit and I, better English. So I will be the person that will follow up with anyone that needs anything afterwards. If there's any questions afterwards, please ask me, or just write it in the chat, and I'll try to get back to you. And then Merit will be going through the whole policy ordeal. Before that, though, I want to go through a little bit, as I normally do, just an overview of BoardDocs. Most of you, I believe, are already LT or Pro clients and work in those systems already. And since this is really just a focus on policy, I'll keep this brief. But essentially, with LT, you do get the agenda creation and what we'll be covering today, along with an area to do minutes, the ability to search everything, and then the ability to, if you videotape your meetings, to integrate that into the system. What we see generally is that a lot of our subscribers start with LT. It's cheaper, obviously. It is a nice way to kind of get acclimated to everything. But the majority of our subscribers are actually on Pro. And the reason for that is as following. There's a lot more efficiency gains and a little more transparency to the public as well. You know, you kind of keep more things in one place, and the way you do that are through these tools that are bolded, right? So there's a workflow piece that allows you to streamline even more so the agenda creation, right? So if there's multiple people submitting, you can go through an approval process, and we can go into that. I think we had a webinar on that a month or so ago, but if you need any more information on any of that, just let me know. The Minutes tool in Pro is my favorite thing personally, because it streamlines that process immensely. It's a tool during the meeting that allows for voting as well, whether that's online or manual. You can do it all in BoardDocs. It pulls into your minutes. It's a really nice way to kind of just streamline that and make it a little bit easier. In Pro, you also get an annotation tool. So for the board members, they can take notes on agenda items and the private annotations. So that's also something that we've seen over the years that board members have been asking for, so we have provided it. And then lastly, there's a library tool in the Pro version of BoardDocs, and that holds a bunch of different things, but essentially one of the most valued parts of that is the ability to track goals. And we have, I think, done one webinar on that. We'll likely do another one, but really goal tracking is something that is good both for the public and the visibility into what your organization or what your district is doing in terms of your strategic plan or, the goals that you're trying to achieve. And then also internally, being able to track things against yourselves and say, okay, where are we in regards to this? So those are all extra benefits of Pro on top of LT. And then Plus is really for those that have multiple committees, multiple meeting bodies, right? So you can roll this out to as many as you'd like, and it can be added to both LT or Pro. There's a lot of benefits of having Plus, but really only people that need Plus are those that have multiple committees, multiple meeting bodies, or they want to maybe have a staff meeting in BoardDocs, things like that, where you can kind of keep things separate. So that was my maybe long-winded version of the overview of BoardDocs. And continuously, this is something I just want to reiterate, and this is a great part of your subscription, of our service, is that there's ongoing training and support. So not only do we host these webinars that I think are very helpful in kind of learning the little things that you might not have known before, but if you want to get trained, or if there's a new person that comes on, we'll do remote training anytime. It's free, and we have our 24/7 support, which are real people that pick up the phones right away and are able to answer your questions. And it really, I think it's a huge home run in terms of service is right here on our training and our support team. So with that, I think I'm going to hand that back to Merritt. Obviously, at the end, if there's any questions in terms of your service, you can ask me. If there's any questions about, fixing something or you don't understand anything, you can, again, give a call to our support line or send an email to support@boarddocs.com. But throughout the webinar, just throw some questions in the question box and we'll go from there. So, Merritt?
Yes, sir. Good
Perfect.
deal.
So I will.
Yes, so on that GoToMeeting kind of panel over on your right-hand side, you guys should see a chat box or a question box. A question box, right? Right, Andrew?
Yeah, there should be one somewhere.
Yeah. I see a question box. So if you do think of a question as we're going through today, let Andrew know, and as we go through, if we see some questions, he'll be able to let me know what some of those are coming through. If we don't get to it while we're in the presentation today, just like you said, he'll be reaching out to each of you and answering those questions kind of throughout the webinar and then even post-webinar as well. So good deal. I just shared my screen. Are you seeing my BoardDocs screen, Andrew?
I am.
All right. Good deal. We are off to a good start. That is always good news. So yeah, so today we're going to be walking through the policy features, or really just some best practices regarding policies in BoardDocs, even some of the formatting features that we see most often with regards to policies. But one thing I do want to note here is that if you are using another policy service, your workflow may be slightly different. So what we're walking through today is the BoardDocs policy features. We also have partnerships with several different associations with policy management tools, and even with Neola and a policy management tool, all excellent. However, we have tweaked some of those workflow practices pertaining to that association or pertaining to that that business or that company. So while some of the things that we walk through today may pertain to you, if you have had a training session where you were told a different workflow process, then that is the workflow process you will want to follow moving forward. Or if you don't have some of the access to do some of the things that we're going to walk through today because you're not managing your policies on your own within BoardDocs, you're actually using the assistance of your association or of Neola or someone like that, not a big deal. Again, some of this may be helpful to you, but you just do want to, go back to what you have been told on those unique workflow practices. So other than that, we are going to talk about managing your policies within BoardDocs. We do have several subscribers that do manage or house manage their policies within the system. And if your policies are not in BoardDocs yet, and you're interested in getting those into BoardDocs, let Andrew know. And you can just do that in that little chat box or say, hey, I'm interested in this. We do provide services. We have a few different services, some that are part or included with your current BoardDocs subscription agreement, and some that are not, that are an additional fee, just depending on kind of how you want those policies imported, what you want them to look like, all that kind of good stuff. But Andrew and I can put you in touch with our policy specialist, and they'll be happy to share, the options available to you. If your policies are, say, out on your website, or maybe they're in a binder in your filing cabinet, just depending on where those policies may be, we do have several different options as far as getting those into BoardDocs for you. Because of course, what we don't want is, a principal over here with a paper copy or a paper binder in their filing cabinet that perhaps maybe hasn't been updated by, according to what's going on in the superintendent's office with all the updates and accessing an out-of-date policy and operating on those procedures that are not correct. So if we can migrate our policies all into one central location and eliminate those multiple copies that may reside at your different campuses or different schools, and have everybody access that material in one spot, that is going to be the most beneficial. That way we can guarantee when they're looking at that information within BoardDocs, it is the most current version of that policy. It is the most up-to-date version of that policy. It's not an old one that's lying around somewhere in a binder that may or may not be the most current copy. Okay, so again, as we're accessing BoardDocs and viewing our meeting material and our agendas and our meeting minutes, why not? Let's do our policies in here too. That way it's just a one-stop shop, it's easy to access, and you guys have access to everything here. It's secure, it's up to date, and you're good to go. Now, Andrew did mention some of the differences between LT and Pro. One thing to note here is policy is the same in both. So you do have access to the exact same tools in the LT version managing your policies as you do within the Pro version as managing your policies. We pushed that out to our LT subscribers about a year, maybe a little bit over a year ago. So it's pretty exciting for all of our LT folks to be able to manage policies within the system. However, some things to note that you can do in addition with the Pro version of BoardDocs, like the workflow trees that Andrew mentioned. If you need policies to go through an approval process, we can submit those through an approval process within the BoardDocs Pro version. What if we have a policy committee? Well, we can do that with our Plus version, either the LT Plus or the Pro Plus. So you can have your policy committee meetings where we're reviewing and updating and revising policies here in BoardDocs. So keep that in mind. There are some additional functions and features with the Plus and Pro versions that you can add on with your policy management. And again, have everything in one spot, a little one-spot shop, and that way you're in here and you can do everything all at one time pertaining to all of your board meetings. So let's jump in here and let's get started. One thing I do want to point out, we're seeing my featured tab here. This page here serves as a dashboard where we have easy access to all of our stuff that we need to. This welcome page or this featured tab is customizable based on your username and password. That means things that don't pertain to me or things I don't have access to, I won't see on this page, whereas things I do have access to or things I'm supposed to see on, I will see on this page. For example, if you're using the workflow process in BoardDocs Pro, very easy, right from this initial landing page or this dashboard here, I can see I have items in workflow that are ready for my approval. Meetings that I have coming up, easy access to, documents, and policies. So we can feature policies, both active and even draft policies. If I'm a member of the public and I don't have access to draft policies, and we'll walk through those options and settings so you can see where that resides, I would not see the draft policy. But if I wanted to feature those policies that were coming up for review or revision, so maybe my administrators or my folks around my campuses could review those policies that maybe pertain to their department, then I could feature those so they have easy access to those right from this initial landing page. How about active policies? Maybe we want to feature some active policies. we're having a meeting that's pertaining to some or some agenda item that's pertaining to a particular policy, and we know that folks are going to be asking, what is the policy on that? Well, let's go ahead and feature it. So along with our upcoming meeting packets, those policies are easily accessible right from this initial landing page. Or, we have that time of year where we have back to school shopping. Well, let's feature our dress code policy so folks can easily access that policy, make sure they're buying appropriate clothes for their, kiddos that are running off to school. All different kinds of things that we can feature and populate here. The idea, this page is an organic page that will update and change and feature and unfeature information. But that way, when people come here, really everything we want them to pay attention to is easily accessible right from the initial landing page. So let's go up into our options here. I'm going to go into my name and into my BoardDocs options. And I am going to go over to my policy tab. Now, like I said, the policy tab is exactly the same as the LT and the Pro version of BoardDocs. It is a shared tab if you are using LT Plus or Pro Plus. Okay, we can build multiple books under our policy tab. So if you wanted to build out, say, your district policy manual, but also wanted to build out your, I don't know, school code of conduct, or your student handbook, whatever it may be, or maybe you have you're a different type of organization, you have ordinances or zoning codes or something else we want to manage within BoardDocs, you most certainly can do that. So it doesn't have to be just policies. We can do administrative guidelines or whatever else you would like to. It's unlimited. So the more information you want to store and manage within the system, go right ahead and do that. So on my policy tab here, this top box is our policy publishers. Now, if you are a super publisher, and I'm guessing that you are, because our super publishers are the only folks that have access to these global settings, and our policy tab resides under the global settings, okay? And you'll see right here, it says, hey, super publisher Merritt, you already have access to this because as a super publisher, I have all the superpowers. I like that, so it's always good to know that I have the superpowers. I don't know if anybody else realizes that in my in my family, but it's okay. I'm a super publisher here. That's what counts. But these policy publishers here, those are folks other than yourself that need access to edit policies. This is independent of your meeting packets and agendas. It is independent of the library if you're utilizing the Pro version of BoardDocs. It is specific only to information that resides under the policy tab. Makes that really nice because if you happen to be the person at your organization that manages the meeting packets and agendas, but maybe you do not manage the policy revisions, then you can give that policy publishing access to someone else, and that way they can access and manage policies without getting in to edit and manage your meeting packets and agendas. Okay. Also, I have seen folks that have their policy revisions broke up by, say, sections, and different administrators or different departments are responsible for updating and maintaining different sections. Well, then we can drag and drop those folks' name into that policy publisher box that grants them, again, that editing access to policy information only. Okay. If we are going to be managing our BoardDocs, our policies within BoardDocs, this setup here needs to be BoardDocs. If you click on your policy tab now and it takes you out to an external website, most likely this is set to external and it's pointing out to a URL or a www district page here where you have put that in and told, BoardDocs, hey, when I click on the policy tab, I want to go out to my district's web page because that's where my policies currently reside. So if we're going to migrate our policies within BoardDocs, first thing we're going to want to do is change this to BoardDocs, and that's what's going to give us the policy management tool within BoardDocs site itself. Now, I was talking about adding our multiple books, which we most certainly can do, and I have some just kind of playing around, as I've been doing trainings and things like that, we kind of set up different books, so this might not be the best example, but just to give you an idea here, we can also default a book so that when someone clicks on that policy tab, the very first book that will populate, and I'm going to set it to my, not to my lease agreement, so I'm going to set it to my policies here, and it's just a default. So you can still have access to those other books. This is just a default of which one populates first. We also have some visibility options. This top option for show policies is referring to your active policies and who can see that. Okay. Most folks make that available to everyone. That's telling me that once I place my link out on my website that says, to view board policies, click here, it'll direct people into our active policy section within BoardDocs, and everybody can see that. I do not need a username or password to view active policies. Whereas my draft policies here, I can choose. I have some organizations that also make those policies that are in the draft phase, going through that revision process, that make those visible for everybody to see as well. Perhaps you're an organization that has to post a revised policy for 30 days prior to it being board approved so that the public can have comments on it. That would be a great opportunity to feature that policy on that initial landing page so that it's easily accessible by the public and they can view that information for 30 days. Okay. Or perhaps it's your practice to keep those policies reserved for folks with a username and password in that draft phase as they go through that review and revision process. And then perhaps you make it available to the public when you include it in your meeting packet for the board members to review, perhaps for that first or second reading and things like that. So if I set this to only private, what that's telling me is you must have a username and password to access the draft policies. So active policies, or if I set it to everyone, means you do not need a username or password. Whereas if I set it to private, that means you must have a username or password to view it. Okay. We can also insert legal and cross-reference links, and this is just a preference based on your organization as to, do you want that information to appear at the top of the policy before the content, or do you like it to appear at the bottom of the policy below the content? We can also create a status list here. So if you want to indicate what state a policy is in as it moves through its life cycle, we can most certainly do that. These are all customizable. So if you start with a policy committee review, then you go down to a first and second reading, maybe use a propose, maybe you start with, let's see, legal review. So I can just type in steps that I want to take. I can also delete out steps that I don't take. Maybe we don't say, under review, I can just delete that out. Also, we may just want to create a more generic status on a policy. If we're going to be including it, let's say your organization does go for a first and second reading for board approval, maybe we just want to create a status like under review. If I can type in talk, under review, revision, and I'll capitalize my R because I like it that way. But we can create a status here. So we create a PDF and attach that reviewed or revised policy to our meeting packet within BoardDocs. Then we can utilize our duplicate agenda item tool. And we'll walk through this today as well, and duplicate our agenda item for first reading, and then move it over to our draft meeting as an item for second reading. And we don't have to come back into BoardDocs and update that status there on that PDF, because I know a lot of times we don't end up having a change between the first and second reading. Sometimes it just happens to be more of a kind of procedural process. However, if we do have a change, we of course could come back in and make that change. But I'll walk through what I'm talking about here when we get back out into our life cycle of the policies there. These additional fields here, I'm going to touch on. If you want more information on utilizing the additional fields, we most certainly can provide that for you. But what this will do, if we enable these additional fields, it populates several additional fields like a primary ownership, secondary ownership, some different departmental roles and things like that, that we can extract from BoardDocs and populate in an Excel spreadsheet, and utilize that Excel spreadsheet to manage that information outside of BoardDocs. It's actually a tool we developed for one of our policy partners, so it's kind of particular to their workflow. However, it's available to everybody to use, so if you ever have wondered if you could extract some data from BoardDocs and extract that information to an Excel spreadsheet and then manage those additional fields within the Excel spreadsheet outside of BoardDocs, let us know. We can most certainly help you do that or show you how you can enable that tool and utilize it. And then lastly, down here at the bottom, our policy workflow history. This is not your last revised or last reviewed date. That actually goes somewhere else in other fields within our policy features, and we'll walk through those as well. This is that tiny little gray line. You probably see it when you're building your meeting packets and agendas. It's down at the very bottom of your agenda item that says, hey, Andrew last modified this item March 29th, 2018. As publishers, it will always be visible to you. If you would also like it visible to the public or when it's printed, we could of course check off those boxes. The admin executive areas are referring to folks with a username and password, depending on if they're administrative or executive users. Okay. And again, this is just dependent on you and your organization and who you would like to see that information. I'm going to scroll up here to the top. I'll save those changes. I'm going to pop under my featured tab. So we talked about that initial landing page, that dashboard or that featured page there being customizable based on your username and password. Here is where we can customize who sees what. So here I'm asking for meetings, who do I want to see those featured meetings? Probably want everybody to see those featured meetings. How about my library items? Who sees my information that I feature, goals, events, documents, things from under the library? Also, if I were to feature an active policy, who do I want to see that? What about a draft policy? We already turned off the public access on our policy tab for draft policies, but maybe I only want my draft policies when I feature those to be visible to my executive team. That way my policy committee members can view those draft policies right on that initial landing page, or my board members, okay? Events, who can see those? We want to make those available to the executive folks, to the administrative folks, the public. We can choose who sees those as well as our goals and our board member pages. If you are utilizing BoardDocs Pro, we do have an automated email notification that we can choose when we feature a library item or a policy item. BoardDocs will automatically generate an email out to your executive or your administrative users, okay? Which is really nice. It actually kind of waits. It's if you were to feature a new meeting packet, and let's say you featured an event and some information from your library, and then you featured a policy, BoardDocs waits, puts that all together in one email, and when it sends an email out to your board or your administrative users, it'll say, here is an upcoming meeting along with some library information you should review and a couple of policies that are available for you as well. And it'll have direct links to all of that information. So really nice. On our site tab, the last thing that we need to consider here is, if we scroll down here, we need to make sure that we have our track changes turned on, because that is what's going to allow us to mark the track changes and revisions while we're revising a policy in BoardDocs. So if you don't have that turned on, you will want to go ahead and enable that. And again, that's what will turn on the track changes toolbar so we can revise those policies while they're in that draft state. Of course, if you made any changes, we'll save those changes. We didn't make any changes on this screen here. And that is really all of our options and settings that pertain to our policies. So I'm going to go up here and close out of this. Anytime that we make changes under our BoardDocs options and settings, we always want to refresh our screen. That's what will pull in those changes, make them take place. So I'll refresh my screen and we're ready to go. So again, if I was a member of my policy committee, I could come down here and I can view, you can see these policies are active policies, while these with a little pencil next to them are draft policies. And if I were to click on one of those, it would take me right into that policy, right into my draft area, and I can very easily see the revisions and changes that are going to be made available to that policy. So really easy to do that as far as featuring that policies. Same thing if I was a parent and I wanted to, maybe I was considering running for the school board and I wanted to see what the qualifications were. Click right there, it pulls up that policy, easy access with one click from that featured page. Now, under our policy tab here, or right to the right of it, we have our little upside down arrow where it expands open just like your meetings tab. And that way you can access policies here in different states. If you are utilizing or partnering with one of our associations or policy partners, you probably have several additional fields that are provided to you by your association below that retired area. But if I go into my active section here, over at this top left, you'll see I have my little magnifying glass and it says search active policies. This is a great indicator of where you are in BoardDocs. It will consistently tell you where you are and what you're doing. So if you're like me and you get in here sometimes and start working and then think, where am I at? You can look up here at this top left and it will tell you. This is in your active policies. Of course, these are searchable. All of these folders or sections here, if I were to click on my A's, it would expand open to show me all of my section A's. It might be possible that you are using a numbering system here. That's fine too. This is all customizable based on the way that your policy manual is set up. So if you're a section 1000s and 2000s or 1, 2, and 3 or A, B, and C, it's all customizable based on your practice, okay? Also up at this top section, you'll see my featured bar here. These are the policies that I have featured out on that initial landing page. And if I just wanted to remove one, I can right click on it. I have the remove from featured. It does not remove it from BoardDocs. It simply unfeatures that policy and removes it off that initial featured page. Okay. Public can see this information. This information is also searchable to the public as a best practice. We will never edit directly on an active policy. All of our policy revisions will always take place in our draft section of the policies here. So our draft section here does not contain, your full policy manual. These would only contain, the policies that we're working on updating or revising. Again, that top left corner, we have our little magnifying glass. We have our search draft policies, so we can see that information. Any featured policies that we want easy access to on that featured page are right here. And then, any of these policies that I'm working on or looking at would reside here in that featured section. Or I'm sorry, in that draft section. And same thing with my retired area. Top left, it has our little magnifying glass, tells me to search my retired policies. I have my sections or my policies here. You may have multiple of the same policy that's retired because depending on how many times that policy has been updated or revised, each time that becomes, a new policy is made active, the old active policy is set to retired. So this serves as an archive of what your policies were. Maybe you had 2 policies joined together and become one. So you can have those individual policies here and maybe indicate within the policy itself that, hey, this CA was joined with CBB to create a new CBA or whatever that may be. Or maybe it's a policy that your organization decided to delete. We can have that stored here. You never know when someone's going to say, how was that policy, or what was it back in 2015? Or what was it when it was 2 separate policies? Or when we rejected or deleted that policy, what did it say? These retired policies here are only visible to folks with a username and password, but you do have a historical archive of what those policies were. So the way that the life cycle of a policy works, and I always joke around, if I've worked with you guys, you've probably heard me tell, I always feel like I need a children's book with like some rainbows and pop-ups that it says, the life cycle of a policy to make this more fun. But all of our active policies are in our active book. Anytime it's time to update a policy, maybe we get an update from our association saying that we need to make some revisions on a policy. Perhaps you get an email from a board member, or you guys decide as an organization that it's time to update or review policies. Whatever it may be, all of our updates, revisions, track changes will always take place in the draft area. That is where the policy will reside until it is board approved. So if it is your practice to do a first and second reading, most certainly can do that. And then once it's board approved, that draft policy will become your new active policy, and the old active policy will get moved to that retired state. Okay, so let's walk through that. Let's go into our active policy book, and let's say that we have received a notification that we are going to be updating, let's see, I don't know, one of our appointments. I'm trying to find one I haven't played with yet. There we go. We'll play with this one right here. Our evaluation of our superintendent. That's what we're going to be updating today. So again, as a best practice, we will never make edits on an active policy. Some of our policy partners have even turned off this functionality, which is really nice. So you may not even see your edit pencil on an active policy. What we need to do is we need to get a copy of this active policy in our draft folder. And to do that, we're going to right click on this. And you've probably done this when you're duplicating agenda items or duplicating meeting packets in BoardDocs, but we're just going to go down to duplicate. That is going to automatically, see up here at the top left, I'm in my draft section, automatically build me a copy of that policy in my draft area. Now I will utilize my edit pencil to mark these changes here. So there's my edit pencil. I'll come up here. I probably want to take this copy of out of my title, just kind of clean that up so it's not in there. If I want to assign a status, here's where I can assign that status. Now, one thing to note is, let's say I assign the status of this one as a policy committee review. Once the policy committee is done reviewing that policy, then I would want to make sure that I come back and update my status. Maybe I'm getting it ready for the first reading, and then maybe I'm getting it ready for the second reading, and so on. If you are ready to include a policy as a PDF in your board meeting packet, because that is what we'll do. Once we revise this policy, this draft policy will become your new active policy. So we want to create a snapshot of what this policy was at that first and second reading. And to do that, we will create a PDF and attach it in our meeting packet as an attachment. Okay, so I'm going to give it just a under review, under revision, and I'm going to actually cut that date out there and put that in my adopted date. And maybe it was last revised in 08. I'm just going to update this to make a little bit more sense. So these boxes here, the adopted date is the date the policy originated. Okay. My last revised date is the last time we reviewed the policy and there was changes made to it. So it was actually revised. Whereas my last review date, maybe this is, 5/31, 2017. Maybe we reviewed it in 2017, but we didn't make any changes to it. It was still current. We didn't need to update any information. So you can show that those policies have been reviewed, even though they haven't been revised or a change was made to them. Of course, that retired field there is when we retire that policy, so we're not quite ready to do that as of yet. And I'll come down here into my policy itself. Now, we did another presentation or best practices webinar on formatting, and we went into all of these buttons in lots and lots and lots of detail, which we are more than happy to jump back online with you and walk through all the options as far as formatting and updating information within BoardDocs. So I'm not going to cover all of the buttons here. I am going to cover the most common policy buttons that we see and how to utilize those. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to make me a list, and or maybe my list is employees, and I've got Andrew, and Andrew is in sales, and I've got Merritt, and Merritt is in training, and I've got Jane, and Jane is in IT. So I'm creating a list here, and I just want you to see how we can manipulate this list. Let's say that my heading here, I want to be a Roman numeral. Okay, I'm going to come over here to my numbered list, and I'm going to apply a list to that. And I'm actually going to undo that, and I'm going to apply a numbered list to all my list here. And there we go. Now I want this to be a Roman numeral, not a number 1. If I right click on that number 1, I can get into my numbered list properties, and I can choose to have this set to Roman numerals, okay, or alphabets or alphabetical letters. And I can say, okay, maybe I want this to be, kind of bold and underlined. It's like my heading here, and everything underneath it is kind of a list, an embedded list within the list. If I go to Andrew and I utilize my increase indent button, so this increase indent button as well as the decrease indent button here is how I'm going to move things in and out of embedded lists, okay? So I'm going to go put my cursor on Andrew's name. I'm going to go to my increase indent, and you can see that it moves my cursor over under. Now, maybe I want this to be, I right click on this again. Maybe I wanted that to be an uppercase A. I can select that, say okay. And here, well, I want, he's in sales, but I want that to be a list under Andrew. So I can hit my increase indent twice, and it moves that over. And that way, if I also want to say, you know what, Cody is also in sales, and so is, Cheryl. So I can list out these individual folks and indicate they're in sales. And it would probably be the opposite way. I'd probably have sales on top and the names underneath, but you get the idea of how we can utilize that increase indent tool. Now, when I get over to my name here, I only want to go over one time because I'm just going to be another letter, and I'm going to do my training. I'm going to go over 2 times because my training is a number 1. And the same with Jane. Jane is going to be, I'm going to go over 1 time for Jane to be a letter, 2 times for her position. Let me get my cursor there. And 2 times for her to be a number under that. Okay. Now, if I hit my enter button, it's going to enter me a new number. Maybe I am looking to do another Roman numeral. So if I go and I create whatever I want my Roman numeral to be, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bold that text, and I'm going to underline that text, and I'm going to use my decrease indent button to move it out, not to a letter, but out to a Roman numeral 2. So you can utilize that increase indent and that decrease indent tool to create those embedded lists within a list. Also, if I hit my enter button, it will create myself another number or letter, depending on where I am in that list. Maybe I just want this information to be double spaced. I don't necessarily want another number or letter there. If I hold my shift key down and hit enter, well, let me go over there. It will create me a space without inserting another number or letter. Same thing, let's say if I went down here and maybe I wanted to create a space between these, and I wanted a space between those, so I can continue creating those spaces or double spacing that list by holding my shift key down and hitting my hard return, as opposed to if I just hit enter or hard return, it will insert a new number or letter there. Okay. I know a lot of lists happen within BoardDocs or within policies. If I get down here and I have a new list and I need this, say, to be number 3 here, I'm bold and underline it because it was part of my list up here. I can't utilize my increase, decrease indent because I have that paragraph of text in between. So I actually need to start this on a new numbered list. So I'm going to select my numbered list option here. I'm going to right click on my new list here and go back to my numbered list properties. And I want this to be Roman numerals, but I need this to be Roman numeral 3. Right here, I can tell this, hey, I need you to start not on 31. I need you to start on number 3. Hit OK. And now my list below picks up from my list above. So we can get very dynamic with building out those lists within BoardDocs, especially if we have performed an import service for you. And maybe you have some lists in there that are not operating like a list. It would be beneficial to clean those policies up. Go ahead and make them operate like a true list, because moving forward, it will make those revisions and updates much, much easier. Okay. One other thing we'll walk through real quickly before we get into editing and revising a policy is our table tool. If you happen to have text that is aligned in a left, center, right column, or left and right column, or whatever it may be, maybe a list of food or allergies, or any type of listing of things, it would be beneficial to go ahead and build that information out in a table. And that way then all of your text will look aligned, and we don't have to eyeball or space bar and try to figure out where our text and all the alignment is. It's very similar to creating a table in other applications. We can decide how many rows, how many columns, should we add a header. If we leave our border size at 1, our borders will show. If we set our border size to 0, they become invisible, and I'll show you what both look like. What about our alignment? Well, we like that left, center, or right. I'm going to just put caption in the caption box so you can see where the caption populates, and maybe this is a list of foods. Now, this summary is important for ADA compliance because this is what will populate when someone hovers over the list, indicating what is part of that table, okay? One thing we would suggest that we update or change here is this 500. This 500 is referring to pixels, which is very different dependent on the device you're using. 500 pixels is very different on a smartphone or cell phone than it is on a tablet, than it is on a big 20-inch monitor. So it would be beneficial to set this to a percentage, maybe 100%. What that indicates is it will take up 100% of the space you have available based on the device you're using to access your meeting material or access your policies in this case. It does not have to be 100%. If you want the, maybe we want it to be a smaller table. Maybe we just want it to be 50% of the screen. Or 80% of the screen. So you can kind of toggle with the sizes, but we want to make it as a percent as opposed to pixels, just for a better end user experience. And when I say, okay, there's my table there, and maybe I have my positions, and if I can type and talk at the same time, it's hard, and we have names. Now we have all of this text, these cells moving left and right. Maybe we have our IT department, and Jane was part of the IT department. I know I put this as food, and it's not really food, but we have, sales, and we have, not Saks, but sales. There we go. And Andrew's in the sales. And maybe Andrew has a really long last name, and it's pushing that text left and right. You can allow it to automatically adjust. It'll wrap your text if you'd like. You can also go in, right-click on this, get into your cell properties. We went through this in more detail in that formatting webinar. And again, if we need to get back together and walk through this one-on-one, we can. But I can set this to a 25%. I can decide, do I want my words to wrap? Do I want my text or horizontally aligned or vertically aligned? How about a background color? Do we want to add something like that? We can do that as well. But that way then, when I have my text here, it's not moving. Well, it did move a little bit, but we set that side to side so that we can see those cells split 25% side to side. Also, if I wanted to right click in here, go back to my table properties, set my border size to 0. I can say okay. And now all of my text is aligned in that left-right side, but it's not showing those borders, so I don't have to worry about that information showing. So I'm going to save this just so you can see how it looks real quick. Now that we've got some of that formatting in here, we're going to walk through actually revising this policy, okay? So what we would do, this is a policy. We went out to our active policy. We copied that information. We're coming into our edit pencil. First thing we're going to want to do is turn on our track changes toolbar. This is your track changes toolbar. I can tell right now it is turned off because those buttons are grayed out. And to turn it on, the first thing we would do is click on that little pencil, and it turns that toolbar on. Then, maybe I can say, I'm going to actually go to my 4 arrows here, my expand button. Maybe we're coming in here and we're saying, this is going to be, we're going to take this out, and we're going to add new words here, and, maybe they're going to be doing sales and more stuff here, and, merit and Diana are going to be doing training, or whatever that may be. So I can add in new text. Of course, any text that I want to take out, I can highlight and delete that information. I can also just put my cursor at the end and hit it one at a time. So either way, you can take that text out. Now, while we are in this editing screen, both the words I took out and the words I added in, I don't know if you can see it, but it's highlighted in kind of a green color. And if I were to hover over those changes, it would tell me, I'll go back into my little screen so we can see it clearly. It will tell me who made those changes and when they were made. And it's telling me that right over here. You can see that little yellow box that pops up. It says added by merit right now. But that way, if somebody else was in here helping me manage and revise these policies, their changes may be highlighted in blue or highlighted in pink. So it's color-coded according to your username and password. And before you ask, no, we don't get to pick our colors because I want it to be purple, but you know, it just automatically assigns you an editing color here. But so as you go through, the idea being that if you have help or other folks are revising those policies, it does track the changes of who made what change and when it was made. Okay. So if that was all the changes I needed to make to this policy here, I can save it. Once I save it, now it gives me the more traditional track changes. I can see the red text as text has been crossed out. I can see the green text as text has been added in. If I was ready to present this to the board, I would want to utilize my print to PDF option. You know, open up your print window here, and as opposed to selecting your printer, you would select Save as a PDF. I would want to save this and give it a unique name like Revise Policy CBG or whatever that may be. And I would add it as an attachment in my meeting packet for board review, maybe for agenda items for first reading. So for example, you know, if on my agenda, let me cancel out of this and I'll close out of this. On my draft agenda, you know, and I'm building my meeting packet, I might have an agenda item that's, you know, let's see if we have one here, you know, policy first reading, and I would have that PDF that I just created as an attachment to that agenda item, okay? Now, let's say that we had that first reading. I can now, because remember, I indicated that the status was under review or revision. I didn't give it a specific status of first reading. I gave it a more generic status. And the reason is because now I can just come to my agenda item for first reading. I can right click on it. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to duplicate this in another meeting for my board. And I'm going to put it in my other meeting so it's not in the same one. And I'll put it as part of my, you know, consent agenda because it's the second reading. Yes, I want to duplicate the attachments because I have 5 policies that were for first reading. They're all 5 going to go over for a second reading. I can say okay. And now when I go into that draft meeting, there's my duplicated item. Where is it here? We'll find it. I put it under my consent. There it is. And I can just come up here and say, you know what? These are going to be policies. Second reading. And I'm done. With this one, all the policies are already attached and it's good to go now on my next agenda for my second reading. So we have our first and second reading. Again, if that's your process, that policy has been board approved. I come back into my draft policy here, back to my edit pencil. I'm going to update my dates here. Hey, this was revised actually on today is 3/29/2018. Okay. I am going to come into my toolbar here. My big check will accept all changes. My big X will reject all changes. My little check and little X will do one at a time. I can also right click on changes here and I can accept or reject these as well. So you can accept or reject them individually if you needed to do that also. Once I have everything looking the way I want it, I'm going to accept everything. I have it all good to go. All of my track changes are no longer there. This becomes your new active policy. I'm going to come up and change the status here to active, and I'm going to save it. and that is going to move this policy out to my active book. Again, top left, I'm in my active policy book. And for a second here, I'm going to have two policies here because I have my new active policy that was last revised today. I have my old policy that I duplicated from, and this is now going to be retired. So I'm going to go to my edit pencil. I'm going to change the status of this one to retired, and it's going to make me put in my retired date. So this was 2018, retired. I'm going to save this, and look here at the top left, I'm in my retired area, and I have my retired policy here. So that is a lot of information that we covered. I know we talked about a lot of things here. Again, we do offer all ongoing training, always included. Also, several different options for getting your policies into BoardDocs. Also, the 24/7 support. If there's anything we can do to help out, please let us know. Or again, if we need to set up a time to jump on, one-on-one to walk through a training session, we most certainly can do that. It is included, whether that be for any of the features we talked about today. Maybe you get a new employee, a new person using a workflow, a new board member. You guys have enough on your plate. Let us help out. We're happy to perform those training sessions for you. Also, I'm just going to touch on real quick here. We have our eGov Live conference coming up. I know an email has been sent out. It will be later this year in September in Orlando. And I don't know if any of you have looked at the JW Marriott in Orlando yet. It looks quite fabulous. Palm trees and lazy rivers and all kinds of fun stuff. We do have a great time. We learn a lot. It's nice to put names and faces together and just get together with other folks that are using BoardDocs, brainstorm together about how we can make things better. We really, really enjoy it. I see some familiar names and faces on the webinar today, so I can't wait to see you all again later this year. We do have a good time. So thank you all for your time today. Andrew, you still with us?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I was going to just follow up. There was a few questions that just came in right quick. There's one question that I think you might be able to answer quickly. How would the question goes as following: how would I be able to enable the expert feature into Excel that you referred to earlier in the webinar?
Yeah, so if you would just let us know or take that person's name, it's several steps actually, but it will allow you to turn that on and extract that data. And we have a couple of step-by-step, with even screenshots and pictures on how to do it. But I'll be happy to email that over, or we can even talk more about it. So yes.
Perfect. So I'll follow up with them. That's great.
Yeah, perfect. But great. Well, thank you everyone for your time today, and we'll keep the question box open here for a few. So if you have any additional questions, let us know, and then have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you next month. Right?
Perfect. Yep.
All right, Andrew. I'll talk to you later.
See ya. Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.